Beware of them, they'll take your money and you won't get anything in return. Hello everybody and welcome back to Chatting Transformation, the Change and Transformation podcast designed to make your change and transformation journey that little bit easier. I'm Barry and I've been in change and transformation now for around about 20 years, working in some of the most junior roles right up to leading large-scale transformation activities. And the whole point of this podcast is for me to pass on my knowledge, my experience and lessons I've learned so that we can make your journey that little bit easier. Now, this is the last episode of our Agile week, and if we think back to the start of the week in episode 8, we introduced Agile and we talked about how Agile was actually a mindset for teams and organisations, and it was for them to consider both how and why work is done in a certain way, and then to be open to continuous improvement of how that work is delivered. In episode 9, we introduced the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Values, 4 phrases that are designed to help teams and organisations begin to understand the Agile mindset. And then in episode 10 and 11, we moved focus onto the Agile Principles, which are 12 further phrases that help those trying to adopt an Agile mindset to start to translate the high-level values into something that's more applicable to everyday delivery. Today, I'm going to introduce the top 5 Agile methodologies and approaches that help teams to make that next step from the values and the principles into something that is tangible that they can follow in everyday delivery. Now, each methodology that I'm going to talk about is the topic of thousands of hours of podcasts, millions of pages of books, blog posts, websites, and there are countless people out there running training courses about all of them. So I'm not going to go into them in much detail. I'm going to give a very brief introduction of each and talk about the key advantages and disadvantages. If you want to know more about any of the methodologies, I encourage you to go and find that information for yourselves. Final reminder that Agile has its roots in software development, and as such, some of the reference and terminology are from software development. Agile is applicable in multiple organisations doing a whole array of activities, so you need to be able to take a step back from the literal wording of some of the methodologies, as we had to do with the values and with the principles, and understand the point behind them. What are they trying to achieve? Why are they operating in that way? And then think about how that can be embedded in your organisations, because in the vast majority of cases it can be. So let's get on with it and let's talk about the first methodology, which is Scrum. Now, this is undoubtedly one of the most used of all of the Agile frameworks, and its key characteristics is cycles of stages or development known as sprints. And each sprint is very specifically choreographed, and it includes a defined set of roles, ceremonies, tools and artifacts that are designed to embed the values and principles into everyday team operations. Focus is on delivering against an objective for each sprint, and then at the end of the sprint reviewing both the outputs of the sprint and the performance of the team so that those can be improved ready for the next sprint. So what are the advantages of Scrum? First is that teams love sprints and Scrum, as it ensures collaboration, transparency of what the work is, and it focuses on an end result. Another thing that people like about Scrum is that there is a clear objective of what needs to be achieved in that sprint and a clear definition of done, so that everybody, the team, the customer, those defining what the product needs to be, everyone knows exactly what to expect from that sprint. And actually, Scrum imbues a focus on quality due to the collaborative and transparent nature of the sprint structure. So because everybody's constantly collaborating, everyone knows exactly what everyone's doing, they're talking about the work all the time, there's very little opportunity for quality to fall away. What are the disadvantages? Well, sometimes the intense focus on the sprint can mean that the overall project kind of gets lost. So people are focusing on what's delivering that sprint, then they're on to the next one, they're on to the next one. There are, and if you don't do some of the other Scrum ceremonies, and if people don't undertake their roles correctly within the Scrum framework, then there's the chance that you'll kind of go off piste because you lose the overall direction. The second is that it is a very structured approach, and some companies, both internally and when they bring in external consultants to help with their agile adoption, they get very evangelical about Scrum, and you must do absolutely everything that's in there, and you must do it as it's designed. And actually, that has the opposite effect to embedding an agile mindset, because it undermines the team's self-managing and self-improving abilities, because effectively it's going from following one set of rules to just following a different set of rules. The final one is that Scrum is great for building high-performing teams. I've dealt with this one myself. It doesn't take into account the other realistic things of organisations, like individual professional development and progression. So basically, Scrum will let you form a team and keep that team forever operating as they are, but at some point those people are going to want to move on with their jobs. They might want to move organisation, they might want to move up to do other roles, they might want to move sideways, and you've got to then run some other agile HR frameworks and things like that around it to ensure that those things don't get lost. So that's Scrum. Another one that you've probably heard of, very famous, is our second methodology, which is Kanban. The word Kanban is Japanese origin, and its meaning is linked to, I think, just in time. In practice, what you see is every process, stage and flow is captured as columns on a large visual board, and you've seen probably them on big walls, or you may have seen electronic versions of them in collaboration tools, but it's effectively the process mapped out. And then what happens is the work, whether it's a product, a project, an output, whatever is going through that process, is effectively given a ticket and it gets tracked through that process. Now, Kanban is great for ensuring there's a single version of the truth. It creates transparency over the process and where the work is sitting, so nothing can hide. And as the team progresses through time and gets better with the Kanban and gets better working together, it allows them to focus on how they can work more efficiently and effectively to move things through that process quicker. So it might include identifying parts of the process where there's unnecessary delay, or where you could actually do parallel activity, or it might identify that actually there's some capacity issues either with the team or with a tool that's being used or something like that, and therefore there's a requirement to put in place what we call work in progress limits, or WIP limits, which effectively limits the amount of work going through so we don't create bottlenecks. So what are the advantages? Well, as I said, it's a single version of the truth. All tasks are being tracked in one place. Everyone starts to understand the process better, which is great because not everyone understands their processes and their business model, and people can then make improvements and also manage client expectations using empirical data. So if you've run the process for 6 weeks and you know that you've run something through it 20 times and every time it's been done in no less than 5 days, then you're not going to promise something to the customer for delivery in less than 5 days. So it gives you empirical data on which to start to manage expectations. It's also a very simple methodology, and it's great for introducing Agile to a team or an organisation where something like Scrum would be too disruptive. So just by getting the process on the wall, everyone can still continue doing their jobs, but it gives them something else to focus on and it makes them start to think about that Agile mindset. Disadvantages. Boards need to be kept updated, and do not underestimate how time consuming and difficult it can be to keep those boards updated. If you let the boards fall behind or they don't reflect the true nature, not only are they then a waste of space on the wall, but actually it can have negative consequences because some people may still think they are the single version of truth. So people will be making decisions on them. So if there's a board on the wall, make sure it's up to date. It also doesn't, as we said, it's great for introducing the Agile to a team or an organisation, but it doesn't fundamentally address the ways of working the way some of the other methodologies do. So it's not as radical as some of the other methodologies, and therefore you might need something more radical in your organisation. The third one that I'm going to talk about is another one you've probably heard of, which is Extreme Programming, or XP. Now, I'm going to put my hands up. I've never used this. I've never been involved in it. I've seen it operate in some organisations I've been in, but I have no personal experience. So what I'm reading you is research that I found out from the internet. But it's based around the idea of discovering the simplest thing that will work. It's a methodology that emphasises communication, simplicity, feedback, courage and respect. So it does have a lot of links to the previous Agile frameworks we've discussed. When problems arrive, basically everybody gets together, managers, developers, customers, to promote conversation, engagement, break down barriers to communication, ultimately come up with a result or a solution that works for everyone. So in that way, it's very similar to things like Scrum, which is about collaboration. It's very similar to Kanban, where it's the transparency of the work and what the situation is. The advantage is it's very specific to technology and coding, and it's one that I've struggled to understand how we can translate it into the business kind of realm. So it's got lots of advantages, specifically in software development, because it's written for software development, and it's been demonstrated to energise teams and external stakeholders in that environment. The disadvantage, as I said, is it focuses very much on technical aspects like coding. One meaning it's limited transition to non-software applications, but also still has that risk that the overall product and output could be lost. Next up, another one you've probably heard of, lean development, one of the oldest Agile methodologies, and it predates the Agile Manifesto. It comes from manufacturing, and you've probably heard of it when people are talking about Toyota, the motor manufacturer. It's based on 7 essential principles which are very much aligned to the Agile values and methodologies. Deleting things that don't add any value, fast delivery, respecting the team, and so on and so forth. Focuses on getting a product into the hands of the customer quickly to get feedback so that it can be incrementally enhanced for the next releases. Sounds very similar. Advantages: it saves time and resource by getting rid of things that don't matter, focusing on delivery at pace. It's very easily scalable and can be applied to very different projects and operations. Disadvantages, though, is it still does have a significant documentation requirement and recording of past deliveries, and people may not undertake that. And if you don't undertake that critical bit, actually you then lose the kind of empirical, historic data on which future enhancements are going to be based. So if you're going to do it, you're going to do it properly, is the answer. Last one is Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe. Now, SAFe is different in that it takes elements from multiple other Agile methodologies, so Scrum, Lean, Kanban, and it brings them together in a highly structured delivery framework. It incorporates both long-term planning with short-term Agile ways of working, and it's very clear on where responsibilities and accountabilities lie. To me, SAFe is the most Wagile methodology I've encountered, i.e. it's a kind of a hybrid of waterfall moving into Agile, and I think it's a great methodology for those companies that have always had strong waterfall governance and controls mechanisms and wouldn't necessarily be able to deal with the disruption of moving to something like Scrum at scale or something like that overnight. So for me, it's a really good intermediate step for starting to bring in the Agile mindset. It's great. Advantages are it's great for enterprises, as I said, that have historically been using a very structured waterfall approach and need their strong governance and controls, because you still have them in a Scaled Agile framework. But what you also do is you start to bring in Agile approaches, and it starts to bring that mindset in at the team level. And the alignment of responsibilities and accountabilities is still strong and is still very hierarchical. Disadvantages: weird jargon, release train engineers, Agile release trains. You might as well be running the network rail as opposed to some of the names and terminology they use. And also you've got to then think, is it really truly Agile? Because whilst there is some Agile ways of working at the team level, it's very limited on allowing anybody to decide how work is done. So they're the top 5. Lots of different methodologies out there and lots of different ways your team can work. A couple of things to be aware of: be careful of Agile zealots who will fastidiously push a specific framework at you as the answer to your solutions. It takes the fun out of it, and it kind of undermines your team working it out for themselves. Also, beware agile salesmen selling qualifications, courses, licenses, which will generally need to be renewed, and all at astronomical prices. A lot of agile methodology and information is out there, it's free or it's at very low cost sources. There's no agile police that are going to come and arrest you because your Scrum Master license has expired or Leading Safe license has expired. For me, the way I see agile methodologies is there are lots of different tools within my agile toolbox, and I deploy the methodologies or even elements of the methodologies as required when dealing with different clients, evolving situations, new challenges. So what I would suggest is go and find out about all of them. Do some courses if you want. As I said, there's lots of free ones or very simple stuff you can learn online. Experience them for yourselves and then work out what works best for you. And you don't have to go, we're going to go 100% with that one or we're going to go 100% with that one. You can pick and choose, put together what works for you, as long as it supports the agile values and the agile principles which will give you that agile mindset. So that concludes Agile Week. I hope it's been helpful. Next week we're going to move on from Agile and we're going to go back to looking at more traditional waterfall, and we're going to delve a bit more into governance and controls of transformation programs. But for now, that's everything. Thank you all for listening.